Hebrew lesson, part 4, April 26th. Shalom, shalom.
That's what we're seeing in the big picture. So out of that, we get Aleph. So any questions or comments at this point?
Benjamin, I have one. We were talking early this morning about Textus Receptus.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, where'd that come from?
Textus Receptus was the accepted, it was a compilation of manuscripts. It wasn't one manuscript. So for example, when I looked it up, 10 of them involved, including Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, omit certain verses that have been removed from the Bible recently. And 1690 have those verses in it. Well, there were some mostly Greek, a few Hebrew, a few Latin. Jerome, part of the Textus Receptus, was the Latin, but the Latin, if you look it up, and we can't get into the deep things of that, but the Latin was Jerome translated directly out of the Hebrew Matthew, for example. So Jerome said in some of his writings, Jerome was a church father, Jerome translated directly from the Hebrew Matthew. And Jerome says in his writings that he held the Hebrew Matthew in his hands, that it was still in existence in his day. Constantine went about destroying all the Hebrew, and they went underground. So the Textus Receptus became the Greek and Latin that was the remnant church. So this was the Protestants before there were Protestants. Maybe you've heard of the Waldensians, certain remnant churches that were in opposition to the Roman Catholic Church that were sort of underground. They popped up in place and they were persecuted. They did the Textus Receptus, which is these thousands of manuscripts. And the Roman Catholic Church was using these 50 Bibles, the Vaticanus, Sinaiticus. The ones that the modern Bibles are basing it upon are the Roman Catholic ones that the Roman Catholics were forcing on the church. That's where the battle of the Bible has resurfaced in our day. The King James was based on the Textus Receptus, the Wycliffe, the Tyndale. You're familiar with how the Roman Catholic Church did not allow people to have the Bible under penalty of death. That's what the Protestant Reformation did, is the Church of England broke away from the Roman Catholic, and they had enough political influence. That's why the King James, they said, was the crowning achievement of the Protestant Reformation, because what it did is it gave the Bible to the common people. And Rome couldn't stop them because England was powerful enough, King James, to push it through. Prior to that, people like Tyndale, I don't remember if Tyndale was killed or imprisoned, but all these people that you hear about, like they have Bible societies named after him now, and I'm going by memory, but let's say 1500, something like that. Tyndale, Wycliffe, all these guys translated English Bibles, and they used mostly the Textus Receptus because these were the early Protestants. And like I said, there was this battle of these two manuscripts all through the centuries. The Textus Receptus, which is Latin, Greek. Jerome translated some of it out of the Hebrew. So I'm not sure that it's perfect, but it's more perfect than the Roman Catholic which was intentionally Greek, Roman, and anti-Jewish. The modern translators will put a footnote in your Bible and they'll say the most reliable and the oldest manuscript. So when they say these buzzwords, what they're saying is these 50 manuscripts that were put out by Constantine in the year 300 AD. So they'll say, oh, this verse was not in the most reliable manuscripts. So they're referring to their Greek, Constantine, Roman Catholic, Greek manuscripts. But the Textus Receptus was sort of the two rival manuscripts will say throughout the centuries. And it's the received text is what it stands for. Textus Receptus in English would be the received text. So the Protestants, the Waldensians, the Tyndale, Wycliffe, King James, they saw the Textus Receptus as the handed down through the true church, the remnant church that had the Textus Receptus, that had Yehovah. If you had noticed in the King James, they have the name of God correct. And here you have the Roman Catholic. You can look at it on many different levels. And you have the 50 Bibles of Constantine, the Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. So what we're seeing in our day with the modern Bible translations is we're seeing the Roman Catholic, they're half and half, right? They're the mix, or man-made religion. So Ishmael represents man-made religion, where you take the promise of God, the things of God, and you build upon it, and you supplant it, you replace it with man-made. Here's a test verse. Okay, this will usually tell you, because the ones that are based on the Roman Catholic that I mentioned, they hate this verse, Matthew 17:21. It's one of their most hated verses, which, surprise, surprise, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
This kind goes out, the demons go out by prayer and fasting, which, by the way, I found it in the Hebrew Matthew. It's in there. So see, early manuscripts do not contain this verse, and they put it in little parentheses with a footnote. So that would indicate to me that New American Standard is going with the Roman Catholic manuscripts.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that's a test verse. I've made a post with several verses, and I think most of those verses will show up. There's more. I haven't tested, obviously, because it's too high of a number, but I read on a post somewhere, somebody said there's been 17,000 changes now from the King James to the new modern translations. So
Yeah,
every time they come
and-
out with a new edition, they make more changes.
And none of this is a secret. It's not an unknown. It's
No.
just awkward.
It's awkward, and a lot of pastors have shied away from it because it's controversial.
Yes.
And because, as I had one pastor where he had me teaching a Bible study with about 20 people in his church, and the issue came up, and him and I had a conversation. He was so disturbed by it that he called his Bible college professor on the phone to talk with him about it, because he said this had never come up in all his years of Bible college, not even once. He didn't even know. And then he was so disturbed by it, and he says, I don't even know what to do with this, because he says, I haven't been trained in this. How can I teach my people through this controversial, touchy issue when I just found out about it yesterday and I don't know anything about it? And I think he represents a lot of the evangelical pastors out there today. Each one of these issues that you bring up, whether it's the Hebrew, whether it's the Bible versions, which is kind of related, but we're talking about the restoration or the Reformation of the church, any one of those issues. And if you've got a bunch of people, let's just say this represents your congregation, right? And all of a sudden, they're either going out the door or they're in your face, right? And you have controversy in your church. Dream I had, and the Lord spoke to me about when Yeshua healed on the Sabbath, and the ruler of the synagogue said to Yeshua, you have 6 days to heal on. Why don't you heal on one of those 6 days? And the Lord asked me, he said, which side would you have been on? This is in my dream. The angel appears to me, and he says, would you have been on the ruler of the synagogue side or Yeshua's? And I had to give an honest answer. I would have been on the ruler of the synagogue side, because I thought what he said was pretty reasonable. I mean, you can still heal on 6 days. So if you have, let's say, and I think that the ruler of the synagogue, in my estimation, reminds me of a lot of pastors and church leaders. He's trying to hold the congregation together. Let's say you have 40% of diehards they're going to cause a ruckus if you heal on the Sabbath. And then let's say you got 60%, and they're like, well, we've heard the teaching, but it really doesn't matter. If someone gets healed, we're good with that. You know, fine. Once in a while, you know, I slip in some bacon anyway. Like, I'm not that observant. Like, go ahead, heal on the Sabbath, no problem. So here's the ruler of the synagogue, and he says, if you heal on the 6 days, we don't have a problem. But if you heal on the Sabbath, all of a sudden, these people that were getting along are fighting with each other. You've got division in your church or your synagogue, and you might even have people leaving. They're going like Bill Johnson's church when he brought revival home. So I've learned over the years, me and Nina have learned in our Forerunner ministry, that when we go on an assignment for the Lord, God likes to pick fights with the religious establishment today, just like he did in the New Testament. Yeshua specifically healed on the Sabbath. God gave me a book title he said I'm going to write. He's going to give me to write someday. I've been working on it. And the title of it is, Why Not Just Heal on Tuesday? And see, that is the mindset of the majority of evangelical pastors in our day. Why not just heal on Tuesday? So if they do hear about the problem with the Bible translations or the Hebrew restoration, the response from a lot of pastors is, keep that over there separate somewhere. Heal on Tuesday. Don't bring it in where it's going to cause potentially people to get upset and have fights and controversy in the church. So this is what I believe is behind this reluctance to deal with the Bible translations. It's out there. To anyone who cares to take even 10 minutes on the internet can find it. It's public information. And the deeper you dig, the more disturbed and shocked you get. And you have to be strong in your faith, because when you start digging into the corruption in the church, and it's just like what you read in the Old Testament with the corruption in Israel, setting up Ashtoreth poles and worshiping Baal, and it's really no different. But it's disturbing. If you're not strong in your faith, you could be tempted to say, well, this whole Christianity thing is just fake. And I don't say that at all. I think it's actually proof of Christianity being real, because it resembles so closely what we read about all the kings in Israel. And it says they did this right, but they left the high places. They did this right, but they didn't take down the worship of these idols. And this is what we see in the church. So they don't want to take down the high places because they fear the people, because they fear the controversy. Anyway, so that's my answer on that.
Can I just come in
Benjamin?
Yeah, we're getting some discussion now, eh?
Yeah.
Is that you, Jim?
Yes, it is.
Benjamin, I was just going to ask you that I know in some places in the Torah there were certain things that were allowed for emergency or something that was the highest priority. Now, I know Yeshua gave the example of if he lost a sheep, would it not be the best thing to go to look after the one sheep, not to lose it? But wasn't there somewhere in the Torah that the rabbi said that as much as they hated you healing on the Saturday, but there was cases where if it was doing not God's will, but if it was doing the utmost good, you could go ahead and do it.
Right, and there's a couple passages in the New Testament that refer to that. It's true what you're saying.
This is the end of part 4, April 26th, Hebrew Shalom. Shalom, shalom.